Hello, everyone. Teams is the topic right now in our reading. Teams is one of my most favorite topics and certainly the core of organization development and just making life work in general, whether they be home teams, work teams, community teams. As we get into the readings of these few weeks, we're into teams, communication, decision-making, conflict, stress. I have a few things I'd like to share with you just from experience and sort of telling stories from the gut about what works and what doesn't work, and sharing a few references that you may get to well after the course, but just ideas and food for thought. The first I'd like to talk about is the work of Patrick Lencioni. And he wrote a book a few years back called The Five Dysfunctions of Teams. And in fact, the work that you see behind me is the result of some team development work I did last week with a group from Europe and Brazil. And one of the things that we did was a lot of activities, getting very visual, drawing, seeing what it is that we are trying to build in this international project, the team that we're building. And the core of it is it starts with building trust. And that's really the guts of Lencioni's work. And as you get into these issues on communication and decision-making and conflict and stress, and some of you have already talked about this in your experience papers, it's very important to get some really good skills on how to build core trust in organizations. Lencioni has a very practical process. I've used it many times in team development efforts. And I like that it's a building process. It starts with trust, which then allows you to manage conflict, which then allows you to get to commitment, because if you know you can get through tough times, you can commit to each other, which then allows you to be accountable to each other and ultimately get results. So just Lencioni, L-E-N, I think it's C-I-O-N-I, and something to put on your tickler file. Another couple of things that I have been getting into, particularly as I work on this international project team, I've done some work in South Africa this year and planning to do some work, some other international work, particularly in poverty populations. That's very exciting. And the core concepts that we are developing in this project team, and I wanted to share with you, come out of two places. One comes out of MIT, and it's called Theory U. The other comes out of Europe, a researcher by the name of Frederic Laloux, L-A-L-O-U-X, Belgian guy who's done a lot of research on 21st century companies that embrace the whole, that engage in true self-management, and allow the company to be built not just from a pinnacle, one person calling all the shots on the future, but really setting up the antenna of everybody in the organization to help feel and sense what's going on in the world so that the organization can do what he calls sense and respond rather than do command and control to what the world needs and what the world's calling from that company or organization to do. Very fascinating work. I suggest you put it on your tickler list. It's actually what this group that I'm working with here is working off of, all trained in Theory U and Laloux's concepts based on a book called Reinventing Organizations. So just things that allow you, as we did, and you see in these pictures behind me, to get a group of people together, to scope out, create images, get a keen sense of what you've got and where you want to go, and really getting a sense of what you have, observing, stopping and being still, and just taking a minute to kind of smell it and feel it rather than rush to solutions. And then looking at more prototyping than building a master plan that then everyone feels committed they have to execute. So these are really interesting ideas about building teams of the future. And in some ways you're doing that in your project teams because you come together quickly, you try things out, and I encourage you to use these notions of trust building even in these short-based teams. Take a little bit of time to get to know each other and kind of figure out the pace and the thinking of each person on your team. That will help you produce a better project in the end. Another concept that I wanted to talk about that is touched on here is that of working in global or virtual teams. And this team I'm working on now, obviously coming from Europe and Brazil, is quite virtual in much of its work. And as the text talks about and you've begun to talk about in your work, virtual teams can work. The key, though, is this opening up, this willing to be vulnerable, and really testing the waters and being willing to maybe even be the first to tell the truth in the team and set a pattern for interaction that allows you to have trust building, conflict management, accountability and commitment, and all the key things that make teams work. And one of your team members actually contributed a great experience working in virtual teams, works a lot in Google Hangouts and Skype with folks, and talked about getting to the task, but also talks about taking the time to just talk to each other and do some team building work, because that's the glue that holds it together. So as you're thinking about all of these things, I have a thought to leave with you, which is an African proverb that really fits the folks that I've been working with, and I think the notion that we're talking about here in teams. And the African proverb goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So food for thought as you're getting into some of these ideas of teams and all the elements that allow teams to function. Talk to you soon.